Well, that's the beginning, but the real issue here is that the federal government has declared bandits as terrorists, and it's part of the interview that you just listened to where the president said categorically, we have labeled them bandits and we have labeled them terrorists and we will treat them as such. Joining us this morning is Captain Aliyu, who is a former Army officer and CEO, Goldwater and Riverside. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Mark.
It would seem like finally the president received your memo, right? Because you've been talking about this for a while, labeling, bandits, criminals, whatever name you want to call them, as the terrorists that they really are. How does that make you feel?
Well, first, let's say there's some relief. Some relief because we shouldn't, for any reason, brand crime along any of the following categories. You see, crime has no religion. Crime has no person. Okay, crime has no... the different nomenclatures we like to brand crime is what gets us into trouble with fighting crime. A crime is a crime is a crime, as I've always said. For example, if you went and took a life, it doesn't matter whether you were a bandit, a terrorist, a militant, an Igbo man, a Hausa man, a Yoruba man. Whatever you've just done is you've taken life, so you've committed a crime. So once we're able to take that out, you begin to see it a bit more clearly. Now, talking about terrorism. Terrorism, by any of the definitions you can give it, if it were if there was minimum requirements, for example, to qualify as a terrorist, I think those we wanted to call bandits have surpassed it. I recall at a point I was even putting it quite, sarcastically now, by saying probably they are even miffed that despite everything they've done, they are yet to get to that exalted position.
Exalted?
Yes, of course. I mean, let's talk it. I'm talking ironically now.
Yeah, I know, but
I mean, supposing we turned the table around and terrorism was something that was good, would you say by all parameters, if you had met all the conditions and you were not pronounced one, you would be happy? No. So let's turn it around again. Now that it is bad, if you've met all the parameters, why shouldn't we call you one?
Okay, now that the labeling has been done, gazetted and everything, what next? How does that differ? How does that change the approach to dealing with these issues?
Now that we've been able to call a cat, what needs to be done now is all those technicalities that actually place a leash on the ability of our security agencies to move in and do the needful fall out of place. For example, when it comes to arms procurement, there are certain weapon types that we need to fight the war. And if you go in to buy these weapons, it's not like just walking into a shop and picking what you want off a shopping list and walking out. There are conditions. And you cannot buy these weapons that probably, based on the conditions, based on your agreements, are meant for fighting terrorists, or the person who is selling it to you say, you know what, we can only use this to assist people who are in the war against terror. Then you buy it and come use it against people who are not terrorists but are bandits or insurgents or whatever you want to call them, or militants. Technically, you will be actually putting yourself in a very difficult situation. So if help can come to assuage or even take away this threat to life forms everywhere, and the condition is, you know what, the help we give you is specifically meant to fight terrorism. What do? You first and foremost look at your threat form and decide, what is this threat form doing? Has it met all the pre-requirements to be qualified as a terrorist group?
Give us examples of these threat forms.
What do terrorists do? They go into places, they take hostages, they go into villages, they challenge governments, they don't recognize constituted authority, they threaten the peace of a country, they denounce a nation. You name it, across board. History is rich with examples. And these people have not made it any easier for even those who call them bandits.
Okay. Now, you've talked about the arms procurement bit. Is
Yes.
that all there is to it? Is
No.
that all the strategy that will change?
No, that's not all there is to it.
Okay.
Declaring them terrorists, step one. Now that you have done that, we are able to get a leeway to get whatever assistance we will require, and also get that particular, how do I call it now, that particular scenario for the armed forces to go in there and do what needs to be done.
Such as? I mean, I'm just trying, I'm looking for, anything really different, remarkably different from what they have been doing hitherto. What have they been doing now? What's going to be different? Beyond,
The terrorists or the government?
The government, yes.
What the government has been doing that is different is, right from time, we've been banding, no, they're terrorists. No, they're cattle rustlers. No, they're insurgents. Okay? Let's go back to when this started. This started probably as cattle rustlers. Then from cattle rustlers, we moved to, no, do you know what? They're not cattle rustlers. They're bandits. No, they're not bandits. They're headsmen. No, they're not headsmen. That's what I meant by, listen, it's not about the toga it is wearing. It's about the act. What is it doing? If you want to go about, no, he looks like a headsman, no, he looks like a rustler, no, he looks like it. It's not about what is it doing. It's what should qualify what it should be called. Not where he is from, or who he is, or his physique, or all those, as I love to call them, nuances we allow to becloud our vision. And once we take that out of the picture, it becomes easier for the law enforcement agencies to go in there and say, you know what, this is what we are dealing with, and this is what is done about what we are dealing with. It's that simple.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like, there are some strategies that cannot be said on air, and I do understand that. But one of the things that you say qualify these groups as terrorists is kidnapping people. As we speak, and of course, you know that Daily Trust keeps a daily account. There are those who have been in captivity more than 200 days, almost 200 days, two particular categories, are there right now. So what happens in that scenario? I mean, there have been, well, maybe there's been some inhibition as to why government officials or security agencies have not been able to go rescue these kids. What happens in that regard?
In that regard, it's straightforward. We have a situation where kidnapping is so lucrative, it is spread all over. It's not only in the north, or it's not only terrorists who will kidnap people, okay? But then you find out that these crime sets are peculiar to certain regions. Some regions are looking at terrorism. Some regions are looking at insurgents, or is it militancy? Some regions are looking at, what do you call it now? What do you call these people now? These people that go around and pick people up, and before you know it, they've used them to do rituals and what have you. Every region has its own threat genre and forms. So basically, what do we look at as terrorism? Within a particular region, we have seen how people are decimated, not only in tents, but in villages. You don't take them in tens and 20s anymore. You wipe them out in villages. And these people have given you all the nuances of terrorists. In fact, they exploit the fact that you are dilly-dallying to pose as bandits, to pose as cattle rustlers, and enjoy whatever cover they can by moving into this sector. So what do? We first and foremost declare a terrorist and deal with that problem. Now you will talk about others like militancy. You will talk like of others in other regions like kidnappers. Of course, those are crimes too. If they decide to morph into terrorism, of course, they will become terrorists too.
How does this change the mindset of the soldier on the field?
It's not about mindset. It's about leeway, it's about allowances, it's about the technicalities.
So what changes in the approach of the officer on the field to this?
Results.
Yeah.
Results. You are going in for a job. We have to take the politics. We have to take the religion. We have to take, it's just strictly military operations. You are going in to do a job, go do it and bring results. Let me give you an example out of this scenario now. There are times where you see military men torn between peacekeeping and peace enforcement. Now, there are two different things. There are two different things. But when you go into peacekeeping, what you are going to be doing there is different from when you go into peace enforcement. So what I'm trying to tell you here is, we have always known that these people are not bandits. These people you are dealing with are terrorists. And these terrorists are just exploiting the fact that you can't seem to pronounce them bandits to camouflage their terrorist acts.
Okay. Now, the part of the notice of the Gazette says, yes, consequently, the general public is hereby warned that any person or group of persons participating in any manner whatsoever in any form of activities involving or concerning the prosecution of the collective intentions or otherwise of the groups referred to in paragraph 1, we'll come back to that, of this notice will be violating the provisions of the Terrorism Prevention Act 2011 and liable to prosecution. I'm wondering what that means in particular, that the general public is any person or persons participating in any manner whatsoever or in any form of activities involving these groups. What does that mean?
I wouldn't know. But let me tell you one thing quite straightforward up front. If today people who do not wear masks become a threat, what do you do when you go to places where you need to wear your mask? You put the mask on. So it's up to anyone who wants to cross that line to go carry on and do things that are synonymous to terroristic acts in our communities wherever and call himself a kerosene seller. It's that simple.
Okay. In that Gazette, two particular groups are named. Yan Bidinga Group, Yan Taada Group, and other similar groups in the country are declared to be terrorism, and that their activities are declared to be terrorism and illegal in any part of the country. How do we identify these groups? Two have been named. Okay. How do we identify the specific groups, that are doing, things that are anti-state?
Our intelligence communities, trust me, know exactly who is involved. You, the man on the street, the average citizen, may not know who is who. And they're not going to write it on their faces that, listen, we're terrorists. No, they won't. But I trust the intelligence communities know who is who. And that is where we keep saying, take the politics and the nuances out of security operations. Okay. Let the security agencies, the armed forces inclusive, go get their jobs done. Ask them for results. If they don't deliver, we know what to do.
Okay, now,
simple.
There is also been this word around that some communities, for the sake of their own safety and security, would rather side with these so-called terrorists, or rather now labeled terrorists, than give information to the state, because over time they have found out that every time they gave information to the state, these terrorists come at them and take them out. How do people get involved when they are not sure of their own safety and protection?
That in itself is where the quandary of letting this thing fester up to this stage has gotten us. and we have to live with it and live right through it and come out of it. If we had done this 6 years up front, probably we wouldn't be here today. Talking about getting what you call the confidence of the civil populace back is it's a tough one. It has gotten to the stage where the man in that village, not the one in the township, will rather live and survive, whatever the terms are, than be killed. And he's gotten to this unfortunate situation because somehow, somewhere, we just failed to listen.
But the question is...
The question now is, how does this man get to have the confidence of our armed forces? It's not going to come like this.
Okay. Captain Aliyu Umar, former Army officer and CEO, Goldwater and Riverside, is still with us. A number of issues to still raise with him. But Maokwe has some questions. Maokwe, welcome back from the villa.
I got back like over 24 hours ago, Ayo. It's good to see you. And of course, it's good to see Captain Aliyu in the studios as well. Happy New Year to you, Captain.
Good morning.
Let me quickly
Same
get
here.
to the question, which I have in mind. The declaration of the terrorists, of the bandits as terrorists by the president, and of course the official gazette, which is now out. There are questions in terms of how we've handled what has happened in the Northeast, the fact that we declared the people there, I mean, not the people, of course the terrorists there as terrorists, and even how that affected our operations there. We had, there were still questions of human rights abuses, which eventually affected whether or not we were going to get weapons. So the fact that we've declared bandits terrorists in the Northwest now, don't you think that we will still run that, we could still run into the trap of how to even handle them despite the fact that they've been declared terrorists? Do you think that questions of human rights could come up in our conversation with them? And then secondly, and I'm lumping this together because of time, secondly, the issue of the safe corridor, which we've now finally established in the Northeast for terrorists who are willing to surrender. Do you think that we could, when this terrorists in the Northwest now begin to see that perhaps that has worked in the Northeast, maybe they too will begin to adopt that, and perhaps that would even soften our stance in terms of how we eventually deal with the situation in the Northwest?
What is happening now, unfortunate as it is, coming in the 11th hour, if I could say, commendable as it is too, brings on board a lot of its own concerns and quandaries. And that's why, if you heard me earlier, I said, if only we had nipped this thing early in the day, we wouldn't have all of these, you know, fallouts and, if you want to call it, comeuppance to handle. There are concerns indeed, and these concerns are such that we cannot vouchsafe much. There is, yes, we have declared them bandits, or sorry, we've declared them terrorists because what they are doing aligns with acts of terrorism. Yes, the questions you've raised are potent ones too. How do we handle those that have already been caught and they have been tried? All of those are potent, yes. It's left for the government to actually find how they're going to handle that. It's still part and parcel of the luggage we have been able to put up, and we must carry and move on. How they're going to do it is left to them, and at this point in time, I think, even though it's the 11th hour of things, the most important thing is we've been able to bail a cart for once, and having bailed that cart, we move on to other aspects of what you can call the effects as they come. There will be immediate, there will be mid-term, there will be long-term effects, and we must live with it. So that's straightforward.
You talked about the other time, just very, very quickly, about how do we re-engage the people? How do we buy back the trust that we have, that has dissipated over time? Very, very quickly.
That is a job that is going to be done mutually by our leaders and our armed forces. Our armed forces must understand something. Security, as I've always said, is not about pandering to the interests of any party or any particular people. When you go into security operations, we don't know religion. We don't know tribe, we don't know tongue. We only know the act. What has he done? Is it right? And for the politicians, I've always said it and I'll repeat it again. Stay out of security operations. Now, the thing is, you're going to ask me how. It's simple. Appoint whom you will, give him his marching orders. If he doesn't give you results, change him.
Well, it's
that straightforward.
It looks that straightforward, but then getting it done as straightforward, that perhaps is another conversation altogether.
That's the 5 and 6 effect. If we want to do it, well, we can do it.
Yeah.
We're not the only country on the planet.
Absolutely.
And things are happening democratically in other countries, and militaries are being engaged, and they're doing a wonderful job of things.
Well, so many questions that I would have loved to ask you, but there's so much to handle this morning, because I would have wanted to ask you, okay, now that this has been done, how soon before we begin to get results? Don't answer that one yet. At that time, I will have you here, Captain Aliyu Umar, former Army officer, CEO, Goldwater and Riverside. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.